So, Trita, we have spoken a couple of times over the past several months as we're watching. It feels like in slow motion. And maybe it's not been that slow, but it feels like we are watching a concerted, deliberate campaign to inch closer to some type of war, armed conflict with Iran. And let me just get your opinion of this before we even sort of recount how the steps have been taken and what has happened this week, which, moves us even closer. But when we talk about this conflict with Iran, it seems to me there's really, there's nothing that the people who clearly want some type of conflict with Iran could gain by some limited bombing campaign, right? The people who are agitating for some type of kinetic action, if you will, it seems to me that the only thing they could be agitating would be for an all-out war. Is that, do I have that wrong?
No, you have it quite right. But what's happening is that they know that today, mindful of where the American public stands, mindful of their own lack of credibility, the only way to sell a big war is to pretend and package it as a small war. Because that's much more digestible. That's something that perhaps even Trump would be able to agree to. I don't think he would agree to a big war. So they're packaging it as a small war, perhaps even as strikes that the Iranians won't dare to respond to. And if you notice, if you look carefully, you will see that some of these hawks, the only criticism they're putting out against Trump is to say, the Iranians are talking about Trump as a paper tiger, that he's a Twitter fighter, but he actually really doesn't dare to go to war because, they try to appeal to his ego and to his very sensitive skin that if you don't do this, they're gonna look at you as a wuss. So clearly they're looking for a big war, but they're smart enough to know that they have to package it as a small war.
I raise that just because it is it's a stunning aspiration. Because as horrific as the Iraq War was, a war with Iran would be, I think, really. It's really hard to wrap your one's head around, because Iran is certainly no Iraq, and what they are trying to get us into. And on some level, I'm just trying to set the stakes here because there is no version of like a one-off, bombing campaign or some type of notion of like, we'll topple Muammar Gaddafi, which is not to imply in any ways that we haven't basically created some type of sort of like, a chaotic hell in Libya. But there is no sort of one-off quality to getting involved in an armed conflict with Iran. So with that said, you have for months, basically, at least in the context of our conversations, been arguing that what you were seeing develop was a portion of the Trump administration agitating for war and a semi-reluctant Trump driving with the brakes on to a certain extent. But what we have seen that contingent in the Trump administration do is to basically try and put us in close proximity so that like some type of friction is created and a spark will just set it off. Just explain that dynamic to folks, because it's on some level we're backing into war, but we're not really backing in. There's somebody pressing on the gas a bit.
Certainly, and I think part of the reason I have a bit of a problem with some analysts and even some world leaders going out there warning about an accidental war that presumes that neither side wants a war, but they may accidentally get into it. That's not the situation we're faced with, because Bolton certainly wants a war, and it wouldn't be an accident if it was up to him. It would be precisely because he has ensured that things have escalated to that point. So I think we have to be very clear-eyed about the fact that there are very influential people in the Trump administration that probably are not on the same page as Trump when it comes to this issue, because they do want war, and they've been pushing for war for a very long time. They have hardly said no to any war. I mean, Bolton had an op-ed in the New York Times in 2015 that said bomb Iran. So we have to recognize that we're faced with a situation in which almost every actor has a credibility problem, and there are plenty of actors that actually have strong, stated, and established incentives and motives for further escalation. So when we hear that the Iranians have been behind the attack on the tankers, that may very well be true. We don't have any evidence, but they're not the only ones that have a potential motive. The Saudis, the UAE, the Israelis all have strong, well-established motives to drag the United States into a war. John Bolton has a very strong motive and a track record of fabricating intelligence in order to get wars. And that, I think, means that we have to be extremely cautious and be very, very hesitant towards rushing into any judgment, because this is literally about war and peace at this point.
And I wonder, I mean, and we will talk about the sort of the potential fabrications after the break, but I wonder, like, you know, to what we're also managing not to have a conversation about is what exactly should rise to the level, even if what they're saying is true. Like, you know, at what point is it crucial for the United States to engage in a war? I mean, there's what strikes me as sort of fascinating about these questions, the supposed evidence that Iran had in some way tried to sabotage some of these tankers is, I mean, there's been no effort, it seems to me, to create the predicate that what happens to two tankers in the Strait of Hormuz is crucial to American security. I mean, they seem to have a predicate problem too.
Absolutely. I mean, even if it was Iran, it does not mean that the United States now is obligated, first of all, or that it actually really still even has the interest of going to war over this issue. It's just not that simple. We cannot have such an undefined definition of our national interest so that John Bolton literally can make the case that an attack on a Saudi tanker is an attack on every American.
All right. Well, let's take a break here, and we'll talk about the likelihood or not that Iran has attempted to sabotage some of these tankers, and to the extent that it might be possible, what elements within the Iranian government may have done so. And then let's talk about the other story of this week, and that is that our acting Secretary of Defense is no longer acting. And he's also no longer Secretary of Defense. We're going to take a quick break. I'm talking to Trita Parsi. We'll be right back. Ring of Fire Radio.